It's a start. All right.
Okay.
So here we are. As we mentioned, let me see the camera up top. All right. As you mentioned, I'm Mike Readling, avionics marine specialist. Born and raised in Florida. Grew up in Jupiter. I lived in Tampa. I lived in Key West. I fished up and down the east and west coast. That redfish in the picture is like one of 4 I've caught in my entire life, and it was a great picture.
1 of 4. Okay. Okay.
But I'm here with Captain Jay Withers, Silver Linings Fishing Charters.
Yes, that's right.
We're broadcasting from the world headquarters of Red Zone Apparel.
We are. Best internet on the planet.
Absolutely.
I hope.
Absolutely. And Guidelines TV.
Yes, excited about that. It's a new adventure with my partner Jeremy Lee, and we're having a lot of fun with that.
Awesome. And most importantly, Redfish Angler Supreme.
Well, let's not get carried away.
IFA Redfish Tour.
Yeah. Lots of years fishing those for sure. You know, a little bit of history on me. You know, I am a full-time fishing guide, but it's not what I did prior to 2002. I actually lived in Ohio and bass fished and designed jewelry for a living. So what a difference, huh?
How about that?
You probably didn't even know that part, huh? So I made the choice to move to Florida to be a full-time fishing guide, and you know, I actually fell in love with redfish. That was one of my early on target species, and absolutely love just everything about them. You know, the ability to sight fish them, certainly the pull on them. They pull. They have no give up in them, and the fact that you can sight fish in super shallow water. That's probably my overall favorite style of fishing is to sight fish. So,
cool.
And of course, though an artificial item, they're very eager to eat some of that artificial.
So what we're going to talk about today is sight fishing, redfish. For some of them, we'll talk about some techniques and tips and what to look for. Equipment, which is huge.
Big time.
And then, you know, some of the lures you use. I know I like to fish with my live bait over there, but
of course,
you know.
I mean, I guess live bait's been proven to catch a few.
Couple here and there. It's easier to use a fish as opposed to a lure that tries to look like a fish, right?
True about that.
Okay.
True about that.
But you're a lure guy.
I am a lure guy, and I think, you know, in a lot of times, particularly in the summer, you know, we're in a really warm time of year, particularly here in Florida, and you know, the time on the water is very valuable, and a lot of that's that first couple hours in the morning, where a lot of times bait guys are spending that time getting bait, and in reality, maybe we should be throwing some lures.
Maybe.
Just a thought.
I don't know about any of that. This is kind of the general area where Jay fishes. This is a very small part of the area where Jay fishes. So I put this up there just to give you an idea, but I think some of what he's going to talk about is going to cover the whole Gulf Coast and even a lot of the East Coast. I mean, certain situations you can find anywhere in Florida, Louisiana, Alabama. Yeah. So this is an idea of what it looks like, but we're going to start off with the boat.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm fortunate enough to be working with Maverick Boat Group. So I have a 25 Pathfinder and I have a Maverick HPXS. So, you know, it depends on what style of fishing we're going to be doing, or even the number of anglers I have. I can accommodate up to 3 to 4 anglers on the Pathfinder, and then really my HPX is really a big deal about sight fishing or even throwing fly at them. So it gives, you know, my anglers, my guests, it's completely different looks of how we can approach these fish, and I think that's a big deal going forward, knowing that we can approach them in lots of different ways.
Sure.
So as far as, you know, the boats, you know, that's one of the things that I mentioned earlier is my favorite is probably the sight fishing. The sight fishing I do a lot out of my HPX. It's an HPXS, so it floats super shallow, and I tend to do maybe a little bit of a lost art here on the Gulf Coast, and that's pole. It's the big thing about our fish now are getting a little bit more sensitive to pressure, and that's because, you know, a lot of people are out there fishing and enjoying themselves, but, you know, the truth is the fish are getting smarter and smarter. And the reason why we're not using the tackle we used 30 years ago is because we've had to kind of increase our abilities with the gear that we're being used to be able to reach those fish and reach those fish without having, you know, being right on top of them. And I have fished the Gulf Coast from Louisiana to the Panhandle, all the way, of course, down the West Coast, and I've gone, certainly Jacksonville and Fernandina. Back in the Redfish Tour days, we traveled all over the place. So I've kind of seen all different aspects, and it really, you can really kind of dial in that species. And every place is different for sure, but I think what I'm going to share with you tonight is really kind of a across the board, easy base to use,
Okay.
and hopefully, bring some success to whoever it is that's watching, that they maybe be able to do it tomorrow.
Maybe.
Right. We can do it tomorrow.
Sounds good to me. So do you want to start out with what kind of areas you look for?
Yeah, so and I'll first start with the tide. That the tide is a big deal for me, and it's a big deal for the redfish. Everybody asks me when I do these seminars, do you like an incoming or an outgoing? And honestly, I just like water moving. But if I had my choice, I'd probably rather an outgoing tide. And that's just because, those redfish will stage up on that super low water, and I have the opportunity to maybe see a couple tails pop out of the water. That is really, it kind of gets my blood going just thinking about that part. But so an outgoing tide is probably the best. The first 2 hours, or about 2 hours after that outgoing tide is started, that's really where I want to focus, because it really starts to get the water moving. That first hour or so, sometimes wind will make a big difference in how fast that water starts to move. But after a couple hours, most generally, you got enough water movement to make a difference. So, a lot of times, like looking here on the Navionics chart, if we go to Gasparilla Sound, I'm gonna pick on that area specifically because it has lots of little islands, little barrier islands. That'd be right in here. Yes, perfect.
Bad circles, but you get the idea.
Yeah, that's right. You're an art major.
I
That's
know,
right.
it's not very pretty. Sorry.
It gets the job done. So that particular area has lots of little islands, little barrier islands, and although our water here doesn't move a crazy amount, like to Jacksonville, sometimes a 6-foot tide. Well, here our tide might be 1.5 to 2 foot. Well, those fish in Jacksonville and our fish here, relate to that tide movement essentially the same. If there's no water movement, there's no real feed going on. So you'll notice all those in that Gasparilla Sound area, lots of little barrier islands, and all those little islands create basically points where that water is going to be coming around.
Okay.
And I like to target those points where I know the water is going to be coming around the point end of an island, and it basically creates a little eddy. And those fish a lot of times will sit behind those.
Now you're talking on an outgoing tide, so it's going to be places
really on either, but okay. I like to have that outgoing tide and position my boats and my cast, bring in that bait along with the tide. And that's super, super critical to make sure that you're bringing the bait with the tide.
Okay.
That's actually a pretty good arrow, buddy.
That's not terrible. I've done better.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Now, on your side, do you see the same thing? You don't have maybe quite as many islands, but I'm sure similar situations.
Correct. Yeah, we don't have the islands like this.
Right.
But we do have a lot of inlets and a lot of little creeks that empty out. And it's the same thing. You want to fish the outgoing tides. You want to fish the points where the current is coming around, and washing those bait fish out or washing little crabs out with it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And a lot of times, I'll get the question of, which way do I need to be pulling my bait? And I kind of touched on it a little bit. You want to make sure that when you're casting, you're actually casting into the tide and bringing that bait. Now I'm talking artificial specifically, but you cast and you want to bring that bait with the flow of the tide. It looks natural. I mean, truth is, if you're going to see any bait fish, they're going to be flushing with that tide. Not always are they going to be swimming up against the tide. They don't want to have to work that hard. Right?
I don't blame them.
I don't either. I don't either. So yeah, I think it's important to make sure you're fishing certainly moving water. And one of the things that I found by fishing, particularly grassy areas, is you'll see small little depressions in the grass. Some areas have more grass than others, and I think you'll find that in those depressions, that's typically where the fish will sit and basically waiting as an ambush point for that bait fish to come across, whether it be small little glass minnows, pinfish, even crabs. I mean, redfish are suckers for crabs, no doubt about it. And right now we're seeing a bunch of little glass minnows and just here recently.
Oh, it is the minnow run for sure right now.
Oh yeah, your side's getting hammered. All kinds of minnows.
Looks like a big black belt all up and down the shoreline.
That's amazing.
Pretty awesome.
I saw some drone footage of that. It's incredible.
The tarpon hitting them was
amazing. Yeah. I need to come that way.
You had your chance. You maybe come over here.
Yes, I know. True about that. I know. So I think we've zoomed in a little bit here to Gasparilla Sound. You can kind of see the contour lines of those depressions, and that's a great way to identify where those drops are. And do you have this set on 1 foot or 2 foot?
They're 1 foot.
Okay, 1 foot. Perfect. So that shows you, like this, where he's circling right here is a perfect case scenario of being able to sit up tide of like this little island right here. You can sit up tide of that and basically watch as the current comes by. You can see that little depression just to the, I guess, I don't know if that's the north, but just to the upper side of that island. That's a great little depression for those fish to be sitting in because everything surrounding that is grass.
And you can see I kind of did over it with the pen, but it goes from 2 to 1 foot. So,
yeah,
it's a nice little drop right there from 1 to 2 feet. So that's a perfect spot to look at, I would
guess. Yeah, and I mean, if you think about and this, I don't want to get too technical with hydrodynamics, but the fish don't want to sit in that. I know
it's Friday afternoon. Come on now.
The fishing guy just threw out hydrodynamics,
wow.
Huh? So the thing is those fish will sit inside those little pockets, essentially hiding from the current. They don't want to be always fighting with it, but it's essentially a buffet line too, because they can just sit there and face into the current, and as the tide is going out or in, it'll be flushing baits past them, and they'll take the opportunity to feed at that point.
Awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, while we're talking baits, let's move on to that real quick.
Yeah, for sure.
As soon as I find out where it is, you can tell us about the baits that you like to use, because I think I have this right here.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Let's, again, fishing people trying to do electronic stuff. Excuse us.
Okay, I think you're good. Yes.
Did that work?
that works great.
I'm not sure that worked.
That's perfect.
It worked.
Yeah.
Go us.
Good.
Look at that.
So, I use a whole variety of different baits, but I really wanted to pick on a couple of these because they're super easy to use. Everybody that has a pulse loves to throw topwater. I know you love to throw live bait, but tell me you at least like to throw some topwater at some fish.
I like my frogs.
Okay, frogs. Okay, I like
it. There we go. No, there's nothing better than a topwater bite, whether it's a bass, whether it's a redfish, whether it doesn't matter. Just watching it and feeling it is amazing. So I am a topwater. Don't tell my live bait people this.
Well, in regards to topwater, everybody likes to see the big blow up, and that's the I guess you see the push coming up behind the bait. And redfish are really not built to eat on top. Their mouth is really on the bottom of their face, but they're a little clumsy, and that kind of is the lure to it. Is they really will chase it down, and they're very aggressive in chasing it down. Now the topwater that we have shown here is actually a Shimano Colt Sniper. It's a 110, and I like to use the silent version. Now, most people, or not most people, there are a lot of people that are fishing maybe a little water with some chop on it. They do make a high pitch version, but in my area specifically, we have some pressured fish, and that silent version I think gets a little bit more of more attention than that high pitch. That high pitch, sometimes I've seen them run for the hills.
Okay.
So if it's flat calm, no question in my mind am I going to use that silent version. One. I don't want it to make hardly any noise. A little wake on the surface. I mean, you think about a finger mullet or a small little bait fish, how much noise that makes on the surface, next to none, right? So that Colt Sniper 110 silent is a great bait. In fact, that particular color is called white bait.
Okay.
how
I like it already.
Yes, of course. They might even get a live bait guy in.
Maybe. I mean, if the bait guy's not there to pay, I'm going to use that.
I hear you on that. I hear you on that. So,
and we're talking about the one with the double treble hooks up on the left-hand side of the screen, just to be clear.
yeah, and it's about a 5-inch, maybe 4.5, 5-inch bait. So it's pretty significant. But a lot of times, people are concerned about top waters, and when they get bit, sometimes the hooks will bend out. I can assure you that with that Colt Sniper, it's got some hooks on it.
And you leave both trebles in there?
I do, unless I'm fishing big bulls, big bull reds that I know are just going to just absolutely train wreck them, and I need a little bit of a handle to be able to control the fish. I can take that front hook off, still works fine, and then, of course, I only have a single in the back to remove. I've even, sometimes used those single hooks, those new inline hooks. I have found that sometimes my hookup ratio with those single hooks are not as good. I mean, truth is, when you got 6 versus 2, it only makes sense, right? But for the betterment of the fish and the release, yeah, certainly less hooks is better.
Okay. And that doesn't seem to affect the movement at all?
No, it doesn't. Shimano did a nice job with this bait. It cast really well, which those of you who know me, I'm a huge fan of casting distance. And that's probably because the area that I fish has some pressurized fish. And anytime you have pressured fish, you need to be able to get long distance casts so you can get to them before they know you're there. Does that make sense? So
makes sense. Sounds like fishing.
Yeah, it kind of does, right?
A little bit.
Kind of does. Everybody wants to be able to cast far. So the top water. Now I know you guys do a lot of top water where you're at. And that first light in the morning. Even though it's August, I'll spend a lot of time with that top water first thing, maybe the first hour of the morning. Water temperatures are cooler because overnight it's cooled down, but you can quickly see the attitude of a fish change once that sun comes up and starts to warm that water. We're in the upper 80s for water temp now. I saw 93 the other day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It can get really warm really quick. So now keep in mind, I'm only fishing typically 2 foot or less.
Right.
So I'm fishing very shallow. It's darker water right now because all the water runoff. But those fish will be actively feeding. If you can present a top water to them, I think you'll get bit.
Okay.
So now as far as soft plastics go, there's lots of different options. Certainly the soft plastic world has changed. We're not just using small curly tails anymore. Those probably still would work, but we're trying to get baits now that are as close to its natural counterpart as we possibly can.
Right.
And that's what I found here. I've been using this company Weston for a while. Everybody has their own flavor, what they want to do, whether they want to run a standard jig head or they want to run it weedless. I kind of go a little bit of both sides of that because depending on where I'm going to be fishing, a lot of times if I'm fishing kind of open water, maybe 2 foot or more, I'll run an open jig head. I like the hook penetration on an open jig head much, much better. But grass is a little bit of an issue, particularly if you have floating grass or if you're fishing a very shallow and tall turtle grass. An open jig head is probably not the right situation, right? So this particular top water, the top plastic there, the dark green on the back, that's actually a Weston Shad Tees Slim. It's about 4 inches and it's fairly narrow. I don't know. I did bring some, but I don't know that you're gonna be able to see a lot of that.
I don't know. Let's see what we
live.
can do. I'll tell you one thing. The color on that is amazing. I've never seen a bait with color that good.
So I don't know that we can really see it, but most generally I'll try to do my my best work here. So it's a fairly narrow bait, narrow soft plastic, and what that allows it to do is come through the water column very, very clean, without picking up a bunch of junk on the front ends. And the tail, it's a fairly narrow tail. The boot section really allows that bait to work well. Oh, this would be good. I like this.
Look at this. Is the tail.
So, and it's super important because you can run that bait without a whole lot of speed, and that tail is always moving. So I probably use that particular bait more with a weedless rig, which I'll get to in a second, than more of an open jig head. But again, it depends on where you're fishing. This particular color is called Headlight. It's super impressive, especially now when we have all those little small minnows.
Yeah, that is
dynamite.
pretty impressive.
Yeah, you can take some home.
I didn't realize how skinny it was. It's very thin.
Yes, it really is, and I tell you, you know, for plastic durability, these are hand painted colors. They do a really nice job with some, you know, natural, trying to get something as natural as we can get.
Yeah, no, it's awesome.
So they do a nice job with that. But that's the 4-inch shad tees. It's actually a shad tee slim. Now you can see the weedless. That's a Mustad grip and hook that I've actually really kind of fallen in love with. Now some of you know that I have my own company, Articulous Jigs, which I still use quite a bit of. I didn't bring a package, which I probably should have, but this is basically the a version that basically has a football style jig head, but it's a swing jig. So this is free moving, and then when you attach the bait to it, you actually just screw the head in and then run a weedless, and now you've got a jig head that runs weedless.
It will show up.
Yeah, pretty slick, huh? So the swing jig is nothing that, you know, is brand new to the industry. A lot of bass guys are using them, but the saltwater market really is kind of taking on to that. That's just my own version of it, and having some fun with it. Now, if I'm running really heavy areas with grass, that's where I'll use that grip pin hook by Mustad. You can see that little black notch there. That is where the bait will actually, its chin will sit right on that and keep it from being pulled down.
Awesome.
It works really well. You can run it without a weight, or you can put a small bullet weight on it, and it works incredibly well. So I mean, I don't know on your end, this stuff, artificial wise, I think works across the board. Whether you're in Jacksonville or you know, back home where you're at.
Jensen Beach, it'd be great. Stewart area, Jupiter. Yeah. I mean, especially the headlight, the first one.
Yes.
I mean, that color right now, I can hear line going off of reels.
Yes, of course. I mean, that's right.
And I'll be stealing a bucket of those on my way out, so thank you.
Okay, a bucket, he says. Okay.
Bucket. I got, you know, stuff to do tomorrow.
Of course.
But yeah, I mean, I think these are pretty universals, and the way that you fish them, I think, is pretty universal too.
It really is. Now, a lot of people ask, you know, when I'm running a soft plastic, you know, particularly a paddle tail that we're showing here, I actually will use a straight retrieve.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
You're just reeling it back.
Yeah, no different if I was to put a gold spoon on somebody's rod and cast as far as you can, just reel it in. So I'm a slow and steady retrieve. I typically will have the rod tip at about maybe a 10 o'clock angle. And the reason for that is when that fish eats, I want the rod to absorb some of that and feel the rod load up before I set the hook.
Okay.
And it's important because if you're almost straight in line, your braid going straight to the hook, a lot of times you'll miss the bite. So I either will stand on an angle or keep the rod tip at like 10 o'clock so I can feel the bite and, of course, let the rod load up. And then when I load up, I'm ready to send it to the moon.
Your bass master.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I came from bass fishing. I still haven't lost any of that hook set. I promise you. So, you know, and the finish with these plastics, that the bottom one is also a shad tease, but it's a little thicker body. And the reason I have that particular one is I do rig that one specifically with a jig head, and that's because of the body, the thickness of the body here. With the jig head, it flashes really well.
Okay.
And that's really what if I'm going in an area where I know there's not a lot of bait fish and I'm trying to get some attention, kind of like the opposite of throwing that top water, you know, you're trying to draw fish into it. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm trying to do the same thing with this one, which has a little deeper, flashier body. Okay. You can't really tell by camera here, but it has more kind of a pearlescence body, a little silver flash. Yeah, you can. Oh, yeah, for sure. And you can see that, you know, when you're running it with that jig head, you can see it in the water. You can see it flashing back and forth. And it's been effective. You can actually see the fish come in and chase it down, which is kind of a cool thing to do. But again, I typically will run it on a jig head It just seems like and most of those jig heads are below 1/8 ounce.
Okay, so you're just able to swim it right back. You're not trying to
Absolutely.
beat it down to bounce it off the bottom.
You know, and people ask, you know, to that straight retrieve topic, you know, people ask, you know, why don't you bounce it off the bottom and keep it moving?
Like we were taught for 50 years.
Yes, of course. So the first thing I think about is how many natural bait fish do you know stop and go to the bottom, come back up, bolt, go down to the bottom, bolt again? It doesn't happen. Most generally, they're on a casual swim for the day until there's a problem, right? And to that, people ask me all the time, if I have a fish following the bait, I can see the weight coming up behind it, do I stop it? Absolutely not. If anything, you speed it up. And that's because that bait fish, if it's a natural bait fish and it's getting chased down, there's no chance he's going to stop with a predator right behind him, right? So a lot of times, if I see that happening, I'll really speed it up, and it really works well with snook.
So think like a threadfin herring, basically, is what you're talking
about. Right. Slow and steady until the world comes to like a problem, and then you can speed it up.
All right.
But yeah, I think that's, you know, what those quick little baits that you can use, and I think you can be effective and in covering some ground. The whole point is to be able to catch some fish. And redfish absolutely love the little paddle tails, and you can't get enough little fun with that topwater action.
See, and I don't think of paddle tails and redfish in the same sentence. I think of crabs.
Yeah.
I think even shrimp, chunked ladyfish, if you're from my world, that kind of thing. I don't think people really think paddle tails or swim baits for that matter.
Yeah, you know, you're right. I think that, you know, all the years I spent fishing the redfish tours, you know, we spent a lot of time going through different baits that we felt comfortable with that would hopefully put some wins under our belt. But the paddle tail across the board has been very, very popular for all these pro guys that have been fishing the redfish tours forever. And it's an easy bait to use, which is super important. And throughout the year when I do these seminars, not everybody is willing to get up dark 30 in the morning and go throw a cast net or just buy the bait. I guess that can happen too. But you know what people can do is just have everything rigged and ready to go the night before, jump in their boat, go wade fishing wherever you want to go, and immediately start fishing. You know,
no, it makes sense. I agree with you.
Yeah, you'll have to come over and try sometime.
I'll see what happens. I mean, not too early though.
Not too early, right? Oh, it's an early rise. Yeah, I know. So yeah, I mean, you did mention, I did bring another little bit. We don't have it on there, but I'll kind of tease you a little bit with it.
Oh.
Yeah, you mentioned shrimp.
I like my shrimp. I had some for lunch today.
I bet you did. I bet you did. So everybody likes to throw shrimp. You mentioned it, and you know, you think about the number of fish that eat shrimp. You know, not just redfish. I know we're talking about redfish tonight, but everything eats shrimp.
For sure.
From nearshore to inshore, certainly. And you know, everybody wants to have a bait that is kind of universal. And this little, it's called a salty the shrimp from Weston. It's a rigged and ready. Literally, you tie it on, you start casting. I mean, check that thing out, right? And everybody's got their own flavor of what they want to do. But Weston, what they did is they actually took a 3D scan of a natural shrimp and really, really dialed in with its legs and its whiskers and the segmented tail. And those of you going to ask, yes, it has mesh in the tail, so it can stand with a little bit of abuse. But truth is, that little bad boy will catch some fish.
So I'm hoping you're bouncing this along the bottom.
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Yes. And a lot of times, you know, I'll bounce it, but a slow, steady retrieve, and then I'll bounce it again.
Okay.
If you ever wash shrimp in your live well, they actually they'll swim forward nice and slow, and those little legs are moving the whole time, right? Now, in reality, when they're at sea trouble, then they'll escape backwards. But, you know, when you're slow retrieving it, nice, and I'm talking nice and slow coming across the flats, this right here is a great little bait, and everybody can use it. You can put this under a popping cork and catch a pile of fish with it, no doubt about it. It does have a little glass bead in it.
Oh yeah.
So it's got a little bit of noisemaker to it. But you know, everybody, you know, can catch fish on that. And You know, that's it. There's a secret, but those little baby tarpon love this thing. Just saying.
That's a whole other webinar.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So, I mean, I think as far as, you know, actual gear we're using, or, you know, called weapons of choice, I love that. You know, that's a pretty good across the board. Now, as far as rods and reels, this is pretty easy stuff. You know, I still have a little bit of that bass in me, and I still love to throw some low profile. Do you throw low profiles?
No.
No.
No, I am a spinning reel.
But you bass fish, yes?
Spinning reel.
Okay.
2000 series, you know, small.
Okay, so some of you know that, like in particular on the right there, the Corrado DC is it's digitally controlled. So a guy that doesn't know how to throw
and
a
this
low
is exactly
profile,
why I don't throw low profile. Go ahead.
right?
This
So
is it.
This is the kind of reel that you can turn into a low profile guy
instead of a wind knot or a
backlash.
Backlash. Yeah.
Pro overrun. That's it. We got all kinds of names for them. But so the DC, the Corrado DC, is quickly becoming one of my favorites because one, the price point is like $249, $250 or something like that. But most importantly, you can really dial it in. So somebody that's learning with it, I can put that in somebody's hand that has never thrown a low profile before, put it on the right setting, and they cannot throw a pro overrun.
So I've seen these. You can put you put a bait on, you stand outside 20 feet from your wall, you throw it as hard as you can.
Exactly.
It hits the wall, the reel stops, no backlash, no pro overrun.
Right, without stopping with your thumb. That's
no Mike Readling's was here signs, none of that. It just automatically stops. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I'm using that typically on a rod. You know, I show my X Pride. That's just what I have it rigged up with. There's a whole variety of different rods from Shimano that'll fit this bill. But I run it on the Shimano, but it's actually, or on the X Pride, I actually use the medium glass composite because I want to have a little bit of bend to it. And I'm also using that particular setup for sight fishing. So if I'm standing on the bow and I'm looking for redfish coming across the grass, I'm very accurate with a low profile where I can just kind of pitch the bait to or make that, you know, an accurate cast, which is super important when you're sight fishing like that. You may only have a short little window to be able to get that bait to them. So that is why I use that low profile. And certainly the pulling power of these and the way they're built now, this is a great little bait, great little reel to be using. You can use a variety of different rods, but you know, on the other flip side of that, the Shimano spinning reels, that's an Altegra rather, and a Corrado. That's actually a cool little setup for not a lot of money. And that is a rod and reel that I'm going to use to cover a lot of grounds.
Okay.
And I mean, I can cast a spinning rod. Everybody's comfortable with spinning rods. Yes. And, but it's really built, it's a medium 7 foot long. So with a 4,000, sometimes mine are 3,000s as well. But I can cover, I put some light 10-pound, the new Super Slick Power Pro is the V2. I can put some really thin stuff on there for that and make long casts with it. And it's really sensitive on the rod, so you can feel that bite. When you're reeling those paddle tails, you know, you're going to be able to feel that bite and immediately come tight on you. So it's easy stuff, easy rigs. You know, I prefer to go light on the braid.
Right, that's what I was going to ask. 10-pound, you said?
Yeah, so majority of my rods I'm using for guiding have 10-pound Power Pro on them. But I've gone down as low as 5 and 8 pounds.
Really?
In the wintertime when I'm not fishing anywhere close to the mangroves,
okay,
and I've got just wide open flats, 5-pound Power Pro has a breaking strength of like 11 pounds. Right. So, you know, you're fishing wide open waters, but I want the casting distance, I'll go lighter in the braid. But across the board, 10 pounds, a pretty good number to set.
What kind of leader?
So in this time of year, you can use pretty heavy leader, 30-pound with no problem at all, 25 pounds, pretty consistent. As we get further and further down the road in the winter time, you know, I'll go down to 20, most generally 20s as far as I'll go, unless I can't get bit. If I can't get bit, then I'll go even down to 15. I've gone to 12. I've gone to big 8-foot leaders. I've done all kinds of stuff to get bites, but some of those things I don't think you really have to worry about. Most of my leaders are 24 to 30 inches long or so, and I use a Slim Beauty to tie the braid to the fluorocarbon. So super easy overall setup, but that's kind of what you're gonna see if we go fishing and somebody wants to throw low profile. I'll bring out the Corrado, and that Corrado DC is an incredible reel. It's fairly new. I think they're just now hitting the shops.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got an opportunity to play with one, I highly suggest it. They're a lot of fun to throw. It sounds like you're throwing a little computer too, by the way.
It sounds like that, really?
Yeah, it does. When you cast it, it makes this like zinging noise. It's really weird.
Like you're fishing with R2D2 or something?
Pretty close. Yeah, pretty close. So, awesome. But I think like the Corrado rod and that reel, I want to say the reel is 149. The Corrado rod, I believe it's also 149, maybe 159. But for a good solid combo, you can really get a really nice setup and go throw any of the baits that we talked about, for sure.
Cool. Can you throw live bait too?
I mean, if you had to, you could, yes. But in reality, that Corrado and that spinning reel spends a lot more time throwing live bait on my boats because majority of the time, if I'm fishing out of the Pathfinder, I've got 3 anglers, and we'll rig, the typical cork with about 2 foot a leader, a circle hook, and a live piece of white bait, pilchard or whatever, shrimp.
Pilchard.
Yeah, white bait.
Yeah. All day.
Yes, but yeah, and actually, with the live bait situation, the rod, the one reason I got that rod specifically is because the tip, it's a fairly soft tip, so you can cast small little baits, including small pieces of white bait, cast them a long way without having to really tear into them.
Which just flings them off the hook anyway.
Of course. Now, there's a couple different ways. Speaking of live bait, I mean, I'm curious how you hook your live bait.
We hook them through the nose.
Okay.
Yeah, just right up through the nose and let them kind of, like you said, swim with the current.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I think that's probably how I rig it majority of the time. If I have to cast some really big distance, I'll actually go through one eye socket and come right out of the top of the head.
Oh, that's good.
And it stays basically in the skull of the bait. Sounds brutal, but you can cast a long way. Oh yeah, no question about that. You can cast a long ways that way. So how are we doing on time, by the way?
About 6:40.
Oh,
we're rolling. I know.
Great. All right. Well, we got a couple more slides here, but I think no.
Does anybody have any questions while we're trying to figure out how to find more slides? Please enter them in. We'll see if we can answer them. It's Stump J Withers time, so feel free.
Whoa! Let's not get carried away. I am gonna look because I actually offered some folks to send me questions if they had any questions on social media as well. So not there. And somebody actually did have a question on
the multimedia platform.
Oh, we're dialed right in, buddy. And yes, somebody does have questions. Can you cover water temperature and when to target redfish at those temps? So C. Lewis 12. So yes, that's a great question. And water temps big deal right now because how hot it is. And we touched on it just a little bit, using that top water first thing in the morning. But I'll tell you that anytime I'm fishing in an area that certainly has a lot of pressure, and the water temps are really scoring high, and of course the other side of that too is if it's darker water, it heats up quicker, right? So I like to fish a little upper water column for redfish early in the morning, and as the water starts to heat up, I want to fish a little bit lower water column. So maybe I'll go with a heavier jig head, maybe a 1/4 ounce instead of the 1/8 ounce. To be able to get down into those sand holes where they're going to be kind of nestling out, or fish deeper water, deeper drop-offs. You saw on our Navionics chart how it actually went from like that 1 foot to that 3 foot. I may concentrate more on that 3 foot section because they're going to be pulling off of the shallower water where that water surface is much, much hotter. and they're going to go into that deeper edge where it's not quite as warm yet.
And they're going to be a little more lethargic, so you want your bait to stay in the zone a little bit longer.
Absolutely.
So you're fishing a little bit slower, even though it's August.
You know, and it's interesting too, because whether it's August or even January, you know, our fish are lethargic on really two opposite ends of the spectrum. You know, there's super warm water, and even for Florida, super cold water. So a lot of times I'll fish those open sand areas. Now, if it's surrounded by grass, that grass heats up the quickest. Okay, it's dark, it's dark bottom. It's going to warm up the quickest based on the sunlight attracting to those dark winds. It's like no different wearing a black shirt versus a white shirt in the sun. That black shirt's going to heat up much faster. So a lot of times we'll concentrate on those smaller, deeper sand holes and literally drag the bait across the sand.
Okay.
So you kind of hit it right on the nose.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same, like you said, it's the same thing as the winter. You just want to fish it a little bit slower. And then when the sun starts going down, you can go back to fishing a little faster if you want. But
yeah, absolutely. So we had a question.
Yeah, Mike Shelton wants to know what your favorite finesse setup is.
Ooh, finesse setup. Mike Shelton. I think Mike is in St. Martin or St. Croix or
that's a fun place to be.
Yeah, but I think he's actually working. Well, he's gonna say he's working.
He's on a webinar.
Well, I mean, it is dark or close, right?
Yes, right, yeah.
Anyway, so what is my favorite finesse style? You know, so there's a couple different things. I'm a big fan of using a drop shot rig. We didn't really talk about this quite yet because we'll talk about it maybe another webinar for the winter time. But I like to use what basically is an inshore drop shot rig. If you've ever used a drop shot rig in the past, it's really no different. We use small little drop shot weights, maybe an 1/8 of an ounce, 1/16 of an ounce, and about 10 inches or so with a circle hook and a soft plastic. Most of the time, a little creature bait as a soft plastic. But that's probably my go-to when I know the fish are in the particular area, but I don't want to constantly be casting into that same area and maybe get them a little bent out of shape,
freaked out.
Yeah, I can present that one cast, and with that weight the where it is, I can just twitch the slack in the line, and that bait itself will start dancing all around. Then I can just let it free fall down to the bottom and then pop it off the bottom again. The weight essentially never moves.
Right.
And it's a really effective way, particularly to catch redfish, just because of where they station themselves in those holes. And you know, if we were to go forward and more of that finesse setup, we talked a little bit about the Artegra reel, and of course the Corrado rod. I think it's important to also know that a lot of my finesse rods are a little longer. Like I have a 7.6. I have a 7.6 G Loomis Conquest with Stella, but it's my favorite. It's one of that I actually enjoy fishing. But that particular setup is designed to throw really, really small finesse style baits. And in presentation and casting distance, I don't lack any of that because of what I have in that particular setup. That's also the rod that I use, 8 pounds Power Pro. That super Power Pro just came with that super slick V2 in charcoal, or I think it's onyx, and I use that. Now, I don't know if I'd recommend it for everybody because it can be hard to see, but it's also hard to see for the fish. You know, a lot of times, you know, we use these bright green colors, which work great. You can see them, but if you're not using a long enough leader, you can also see the line itself. So I hope that answered your question, Mike.
We have another one from Glenn McFarland.
Okay,
he wants you to elaborate on your fly fishing setup.
Oh, well, fly fishing setup. Actually, one of my secrets that everybody asks me, do you actually fly fish? Of course I do. I absolutely love it. So my fly fish setup specifically for redfish is an 8-weight NRX Pro 1. Now, I'm not traveling very far with that Pro 1. But I like the 8-weight, and the Pro One is it's a relatively stiff 8-weight. And the reason for that is because every time I go fly fishing, it's always windy. I don't care if it could be flat calm until I put that rod in the boat, and for sure we're going to see some wind. So that 8-weight NRX from G Loomis, it's a great rod to be punching through the wind, as well as early in the morning. I'm a big fan of throwing gurglers, small little gurglers. You can just strip them, nice pop it on the surface, and it looks like a little shrimp on the surface, just kind of tweaking out. And I think that right there is a great little setup. The reel I use on that particular one is a Nautilus X series. It's called the XL, I think. And I used Cortland. I think it's a guide taper, and it's a great little setup. And anybody that comes on my boat that wants to throw fly, that's typically what we're going to be using. If we want to throw small little bait fish patterns, I have a G Loomis Asquith 8-weight as well, with a Nautilus NVG. But you know, that's one of the cool things about guys that want to throw fly is typically they only come with 1 or 2 people, and I can fish out of my skiff, and I can actually, for lack of a better word, go hunting. I can be on the pole up top, and I can literally point the boat in the direction where these fish are and tell the folks that are my anglers, I can say, you know, 11 o'clock, 30 feet. And we have a shot at it. You know, if we get some anglers that can throw some fly, it could be a lot of fun.
And if you don't get anglers that can throw fly,
it can still be a lot of fun.
You yell at them a lot?
No, I'm a 0 yell guy, but I've got some sarcasm that is pretty solid. It's pretty solid.
Well, Mike Shelton liked your answer about finesse baits.
He wants to know, see whether he likes it or not. That's impressive.
He wants to know how I can book a charter with you to learn these techniques.
Oh, hey, that's great. Now, I think that guy needs to be out of my skiff, because he is an artificial guy. I've had communication with him before. And yeah, you can reach me. My mobile number, I'll put this out to the world.
Oh.
Is that dangerous? Oh, look at there. It's already dialed in. So yeah, my email is easy enough. I'm very approachable on social medias, whether it's my Facebook at J Withers or my Instagram. It's CAPTJ, just the letter J, and the last name is Withers. Easy to find. Got lots of little videos on the internet and YouTube, and
most any corner in Port Charlotte with a sign.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
pretty much. I'm a poor old fishing guide, hey, so we try to get some work done. But yeah, I love to fish with you. I'm pretty sure I can have some topwater lined up, ready to go.
I'd like to fish with you in St. Croix or wherever you are right now, by the way.
Yes, of course you would. Of course you would.
I don't see any other questions. I see Mr. McFarland said thank you, so yes, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate that. I'm curious too, when we finish this up, do they have the ability to, you know, put on there or post somewhere what they would like to see down the road from us?
They've got our emails, and feel free to use them. And, you know, obviously let me know, let him know if you have any ideas for webinars in the future, if there's anything you want to know about, because I've done so many of these, I'm about out of ideas.
Oh, okay, really?
So I'm looking for all kinds of outside influence at this point.
So that's the real answer why I got him to drive 4 hours over here.
That's exactly right. That and you have Hooters.
Oh yes, true about that.
So,
just down the street.
You know,
yeah, very good.
No, we're always looking for suggestions for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like him, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter.
Yes, I do have a Twitter too, but I hardly ever use it.
I'm a tweeting fool.
Are you really?
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, we're both available. Any questions, feel free to ask. You know, and like I said, anytime somebody has a question, they can shoot me a message on any of those socials. I'm always there to answer questions, whether it's from boats to gear to rods, reels, tackle, baits, even questions about live wells. I've answered lots of different questions. Be happy to help.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, man.
I appreciate it.
Good times.
Yeah,
Good
man.
times. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.